Namaskar, I am Himangini Rajput, Bureau Head, Gujarat from Elets Technomedia. I welcome you all for today's webinar. We all know that our country is facing challenge and threat posed by growing pandemic of COVID-19 in a very larger space. Many of us still looking for solutions with many questions in mind. When will this lockdown end? How safe we are? What necessary steps are taken by government to ensure that we are prepared well to face the challenge and threat posed by growing pandemic of COVID-19, this coronavirus? What initiatives our district administrators are taking to fight with this pandemic? Solutions to all queries you will find here as ELETS is trying a small way through webinars to fight this pandemic in order to find the right information for everyone by inviting all the policymakers, thought leaders, senior government officers for the special and exclusive conversation with ELETS online so that only right information reach out to you all. And to give few insights in how district administrators are working and fighting this pandemic of COVID-19, we have Shri Rajesh Kankipati, 2011 batch IAS officer, also a TEDx speaker, currently posted as district magistrate and collector of Surendranagar, who has taken many innovative steps to fight COVID-19. He was praised and awarded by Chief Minister of Gujarat for his amazing work during his service as DDO Surat. Not only he is a sincere and dedicated IAS officer for Gujarat, he is a wonderful storyteller also and a singer as well. And the session will be moderated by a very prominent personality, Dr. Ravi Gupta, a social entrepreneur who has been promoting innovations in various sectors for the development of society for 2 decades through his research, advocacy, conferences, publication, and workshops in several countries, including UK, USA, Tunisia, Geneva, Dubai, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Thailand, and among many others. He started ELET 17 years ago, the premier technology and media research organization of Asia and the Middle East, has spread its wings in India and across the world over the years. Since 2003, the organization has been championing the cause of governments, building knowledge sharing platforms and highlighting importance of innovations for governance, health, education, urban development, and banking and finance sectors, among others, through conferences, publications, and knowledge portals. Be it eGov, digital learning, eHealth, the banking and finance post publications, they have highlighted innovations towards the endeavor of building a knowledge society. So I request now Dr. Ravi Gupta to take over this session further. Thank you, sir.
Welcome, Rajesh ji. Thank you, Himangini. Rajesh ji, we are indeed honored to have you here. We have a live audience right now on Zoom, and we are live on the Facebook also. So there will be some questions here on the Zoom and also on the Facebook by the audience. And we are interested to know from you that at ground zero in your district, what is the corona situation and how is the district administration handling the situation? Please, Rajesh.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ravi Gupta and Hemangani. And I appreciate the ELETS Foundation for giving me an opportunity to share my experiences at the same time to listen to you. Because at this point of time in history and in the situation that we are sailing in, listening to each other, I think, is one of the most important fundamental aspects for both governance and to live at large. So I would structure my talk by trying to show some perspective, some historical perspective on COVID, and then try to link it up with, say, economy and some ideas for the post-COVID world. Will it be really a post-COVID world or not? And then link it to what Gujarat government and Surendranagar in particular are doing. So, and in the meanwhile, in whatever I talk, if there are any questions or any new ideas that emerge, please keep posting. So, like wars and disasters, even pandemics change the course of history. History at the end is his story, is his story. So it is somebody's story that we read and we name it as history. So going back into history, say in 1600s, it was smallpox and influenza that has destroyed the Native American population when the Western Europeans entered the land of Americas. And that paved way to the colonization of Americas and then for the colonization of the entire world. So that is one glaring aspect of how pandemics have in fact transformed the balance of power and transformed the structure of power in the world. If I have to quote one more example of the famous yellow fever, if we observe the world map, if we observe the Caribbean region, there is a country called Haiti, Haiti, whose capital is Saint Dominic. Now, Haiti was a place, in fact, it is the first independent country in the Caribbean world right in 1804. And Spain and France were in fact attacking the country to occupy the country because Haiti is one of the largest sugar producing countries of the world. And at that time, in spite of the might of the French colonial powers, and in spite of a belief of the white man's supremacy and the black man's inferiority, French powers lost because of the pandemic of yellow fever that entered Haiti through the slave trade of Africa. So that is how, again, pandemics, this is how alter the course of history. And we all are hearing about the last pandemic that has, in fact, shaken the entire humanity, which is the Spanish flu in the year 1918, approximately a century ago. But one should not forget that the time of Spanish flu was, in fact, the time of the ending of the World War I. And in fact, the American President Woodrow Wilson, in fact, he is the father of public administration. He is credited to have been the person who separated political science from public administration and gave rise to a new discipline. And that person was affected with Spanish flu when he came to France to sign the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the World War I. And Germany, in spite of a superior position, lost to the Allied powers because of the pandemic of Spanish flu. So, if we just throw a thought, what if Germany would have won the war, and what if Germany would have led the world after the post-World War I, and how the world would have looked, we never know. So one thing that we need to remember is that pandemics, in fact, change the course of history. And then what does pandemics do? They promote anti-immigration. They promote fear psychosis. They promote nativism. They promote tribalism. They promote ethnocentrism. And there are social upheavals. There are misunderstandings, miscommunications, misinterpretations, and we tend to mistrust the other. If I have to give you a famous example from the India's freedom movement, the city of Pune, which is now Pune, was affected with plague. And during the Pune's plague, there was a plague commissioner by name Mr. Rand. And Pune's plague commissioner Rand was killed by Chapekar brothers, who were notable figures in the India's history movement. And they were given protection by none other than Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who said freedom is my birthright. So the British excesses, of course, during the time of the Pune plague, the way they quarantined the Pune city, the way they entered, already they were having a colonial mindset. But because already we had a mistrust on the British rule and we understood their divide and rule policies, over and above that, when a pandemic came, the irritation of the people, the tolerance level of the people broke to such an extent that it led to the murder of an important high-ranking official of the British government. So pandemics should be seen in a very broader extent. It should not be seen from narrow parochial and particularistic lenses, because pandemics often alter the course of history. And during this time, because of the fall in the demand for oil, and when, say, digging oil has become costlier than selling oil, and when the prices of oil have fallen down to prices of some brands of mineral water bottles like Himalaya or O2, the shaking of the oil economies can in fact destabilize countries and promote radicalism, and the and in fact the turbulence in the wells of oil is quite dangerous for the entire, say, the sea routes from the Malacca to the Gulf of Eden and to the Suez Canal, where 70% of trade by value and 60% of trade by volume in fact happens. So uh, that is how I try to put the pandemic in a larger historical context for us to see, because this is just a 4-month-old crisis, a 6-month-old crisis to be more precise, with China taking into account. But the historical lessons of pandemics cannot be neglected. And with this, I want to now throw a thought that now when we are looking at lives to adapt to the post-COVID world for both lives and livelihoods, we need to realize one thing. Were the normals in the pre-COVID world really the normals? Because the pre-COVID world had equality in terms of both income inequality and digital inequality. So if we have to flatten the COVID curve, we need to flatten these curves of inequality that emerged due to lifestyle diseases, mental problems, climate change, etc. So we need to think whether the normal was really a normal, or has the lockdown taught us some new things to show that this is in fact not the normal that we are living. If at all we observe the fatality rate and the causes of fatality in hospitals that I deal with, every major fatality is leading to a comorbid condition of diabetes or hypertension or kidney failure, which are basically a function of social problems like drinking, or social problems like depression, leading to higher cholesterol, or lack of walking, or lack of peace at home. A person who is not able to sleep properly is prone to every other disease. Once upon a time, there was an era where disease was there, and hence sleep was a problem. But today, sleep is a problem, and hence the diseases. So what we need to really realize is the COVID morbidity that we are seeing, the COVID fatality we are seeing, the COVID mortality we are seeing, is it really due to COVID, or due to the abnormality we have created after post World War II by going for conspicuous consumption, heavy consumerism, fake modernity, mistaken modernity, not modernization but westernization, where imitative modernity was the norm, and due to which we consumed more. We are worried more about the content of the fruit in the shampoo than in the plate. We are worried more the about the quality of the uh, how the chambers, the interiors, than about the open spaces. So these abnormalities in fact created conditions for morbidity in COVID. If at all these conditions would not have been there, probably the mortality rate and fatality rate of COVID would have been much lesser as the trends look. So I think we need to both the words silent and listen are made of the same alphabets. LISTEN and SILENT. So we need to listen, sit back and be silent and look for new normals in this post-COVID world. And of course, I do realize that what I am saying, I am trying to oversimplify the issue by saying that we created new abnormalities. But the fact now is that COVID is there. And I personally don't compare it to a recession or a Great Depression. In fact, it is the paralysis of the trade, because the basic economic function of exchange is not happening, as demand and supply problem has come at the same time. And this is somewhere a pandemic induced recession that has come out of the paralysis of trade. And in such a situation, the economists tend to suggest the recovery in three types. One is a L type, where you fall and then you plateau, which is very dangerous. Then we have a V-shaped recovery, where the economy falls at one place. The dip is so steep that you again then raise because of the good physical stimulus packages announced by the government. Sometimes, because in China, as we are seeing, and Italy, we are seeing, the second wave of cases are also coming, and we don't know how the future would be. So the V shape can become a W shape in terms of the first V. So down and raise, and again you may fall. Maybe the fall may not be to a great extent, but you fall and again you raise. So we don't know whether it is a single dip of V curve or a double dip recovery of two V curves. But the estimates of the IMF and World Bank are very positive for the years, say 2021-22 and all, where they are showing nearly 5 to 6% of growth. But one thing that is very sure is that there is heavy disruption in the economy now. But I think this disruption will also lead to transformation of jobs. If I have to quote an example, during the SARS episode of 2003, that was the time online trading platforms grew so much that Alibaba could become what he is today because of SARS. As Einstein says, every crisis has definitely an opportunity. But the problem with the COVID is some sectors rise and some sectors get closed. Say tourism, travel is now closed, but say health is on the peak. And it is this opportunity that we are using today, that say we are creating health infrastructure. There have been studies in this country that have recommended 6% expenditure of GDP on health and education. They say could provide economic security to this nation. So far, we are only spending 1.8 to 2.4% of GDP. I think this will grow enormously due to the COVID say pandemic. And I think the good measures that say government has taken, if you go to the MSME portals, there is a portal named SAFE, where if you produce anything with regard to health equipment, government is ready to purchase. Today at 5 o'clock, the Honorable Finance Minister announced a slew of policies where micro, small, medium enterprise definition, the basic definition has got changed, because many companies were afraid to graduate themselves from micro to small, small to medium because of the loss of benefits. And they saw the micro, small, medium enterprise sector not in just in terms of the investment, but also in turnover. And government is creating conducive atmosphere for these micro units, which are 99% of the industries in MSME are basically micro. So government is giving them new chances. And if I have to talk about labor laws at this moment, because labor laws are very important. So say, for example, the government of Gujarat has taken lead, UP has taken lead, MP has taken lead. For example, the Gujarat government says that for the first 1200 days after the commencement of production starts, for the first 1200 days, nearly 35 contract laws are not applicable, saying the Trade Union Act, the Industrial Disputes Act, the Contract Labor Act, the Equal Remuneration Act. We are only looking for Minimum Wages Act. We are looking for the safety norms at the workplace, and we are also looking at maternity benefits and issues to prevent fatality. But otherwise, we are giving flexible environment for companies to come over, uh, especially from China and other parts of the world. And when East Asia countries are competing like Thailand, Vietnam to get investment, we states are also working hard to reform these labor laws. And if I have to give an example, in the government, there is a mechanism to start a permission, and you need a permission to close the industry, not just to start. Now, when you have 100 workers, you need to take permission to close the industry, and it takes time. And when you don't close the industry, when your industry is not working, you have to pay them salaries. When you pay them salaries, you will not be able to pay the loan. When you don't pay loan, it become an NPA, and then the government or the investigating agencies attack the bankers, and then uh, bankers inclination to give loans will go less. So we are in fact addressing these problems by removing these kind of controls, by reforming our labor laws. And the one good thing, as we all know, is the emergence or probably the re-emergence of a silent phenomena called gig economy, the GIG economy, which is also can be labeled as a gift economy or a shared economy or a collaborative economy, in terms that government has suggested long back about contract farming, about pooled farming, where if at all there is one tractor in the village, 4 or 5 people can come together, invest in the tractor, and then do farming. So these were things that were already in vogue but were not getting practiced. But because now of less capital availability and some reduced consumption due to the lack of confidence of the consumer, I think these things will start picking up, which will then in fact increase the agriculture output, work from home, and even working for many platforms at the same time. So I work as a taxi driver both for Ola and also Uber. So when I get a customer for Ola, I run Ola, and if I am seeing in my other mobile there is a need for a Uber passenger, I switch off Ola and I shift to Uber. So these flexible, fluidic, amoebic workplaces and these kind of things, I think, will shape the future of the companies, I think, in the post-COVID world. So this will also remove the alienation of the worker, the boredom of the worker, and also prevent him from his inactivity and hibernation at times. And it will create probably a more proactive and a consumer-friendly economy. And not but loss, not but last, but I think at last I want to say, before I conclude and take up questions, China has already opened the Disneyland with masks. China has 6 to 7 months of experience in handling the COVID. So many people are thinking about the demise of China, but I don't think quite it is happening because China has the experience now in handling the crisis. And say after 6 months, the major economies of the world still are dealing with the COVID, and China begins manufacturing. China will again become the engine for the world. And we need to learn from China, and we need to take some inspiration from the positives of China. And I think we need to adapt it and tailor it to our needs, so that we basically now restart and re-kick our economy to a higher trajectory with the physical stimulus of the government and also the subsidies to the poor, where both demand and supply can be managed by putting some money in the hands of the poor through mechanisms like Manrega, at the same time incentivizing the uh, the the person who is manufacturing. I think this combined strategy will help us to save
Yeah, Rajesh,
Yes.
excellent. I think view you have given on both of the historical perspective, the economic perspective, the social perspective, and also you have talked about the post Corona economy. And let me ask you that you mentioned about the labor laws. The governments are reforming the laws here in the country. Various states are taking the steps. Or there are like still discussions happening, and as you have mentioned, that China is anyway 6 months ahead of us. It is like opening up the district land, opening up the malls, opening up the shops, opening up the factories. Now there is a lot of discussion happening that many companies will look at India as an option, open another facility here to prevent any situation again like this, where they are dependent on a single country. But there are like apprehensions that India is not reforming fast enough, and the companies may still go to places like Vietnam or Southeast Asia. So, do you think that beyond the labor laws, there are other reforms needed by the Indian government, Indian states to attract the investments?
See, undoubtedly, what you have said is a part of the discourse in the media, and Vietnam has probably a scope of cheaper labor than India. But I think with Prime Minister Modi at the helm of the affairs, we have nearly jumped nearly 80 to 90 spaces in the ease of doing business index. There is a very high competition on the Niti Aayog index with regard to ease of doing business among the states. There is an urge within the states and amongst the states to be more business friendly to attract investments. And we are seeing investor friendly summits being happening. So I think although on one side this argument is in vogue, I think we are reforming very quick. If we see today, for example, with regard to employee provident fund, a very microscopic thing. Government had said for 3 months, the provident fund of the employee will be shared 100% by the government itself. Earlier, it was 50-50%. So government is trying to put money in the hands of the consumer or the worker. Similarly, if I have to say, the uh, there are platforms now, say Champions portal, where you can give your complaints, and there are portals of MSME where if you upload your documents now, your loan can be approved in 48 hours. Similarly, I have been flooded with so many mails now to restart industry, and the permission to restart industries comes within 5 minutes. So we, while we realize that the business of the government is not to be in business, but we very well realize that state has a role to play in promotion of the business. So we are an English speaking economy, we have the demographic dividend, we have the skills, we have the adaptability to adapt to change. I think these all factors should and will help us bringing a lot of investment, along with a very important fact that we are a technological driven country. If you see China's growth is basically an export led growth, but we are thinking and we are on growth led exports. So if their exports come down, China will collapse. But we are a growth-led export nation. So it is our growth that is fueling exports. And if we see at the moment the kind of growth we have, I don't think any nation apart from China can parallel us. To some extent, say Brazil can come near us. So I think to avoid that flight of capital, I think states have to bear the responsibility of reforming fast, and there is no other go. And I think steps have been taken in the right direction. If at all we see the press conference of the Honorable Finance Minister at 5 p.m. today.
Mr. Rajesh, there are some questions on your screen. If you look at the Q&A button, so there are varied range of questions.
Okay.
So if you look at it, like there's a question that what are the constraints to gather and manage quarantine facilities during COVID-19 crisis in your district? Do you?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to read, but can you
Yeah,
please
yeah,
help
I,
in
yeah,
reading
yeah,
the
yeah.
question? I'm
I can
sorry.
read it. Yeah, no problem at all. So there is a question that what are the constraints to gather and manage quarantine facilities during COVID-19 crisis in your district?
Yes. So this issue of the quarantine, we have two types of quarantine basically. One should understand the difference between isolation and quarantine. So isolation is what happens to a symptomatic patient in a hospital when he is admitted into an isolation ward. But when it is quarantine, Government of India says for mild or pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic patients, home quarantine or institutional quarantine can be the norm. In home quarantine, you are typically in a room for 14 days, and people to people contact inside the home also should be technically very, very less. But the structure of the Indian home, which are say mostly 100 square yards, is what our even luxurious houses are at some places, and many people live in slums. So that is a very big challenge in terms of the space we have, and the typical structure of houses. We have one kitchen, one living room and one bedroom, and where 6 to 7 people are staying. And if there is a person found with symptoms and mild symptoms, or if a person has come in contact with a COVID positive patient or a suspect COVID patient, to quarantine himself. See, because it is very easy for me to say ki you should be now quarantined in home. It is very easy for me, but for him to quarantine himself is a challenge. On the other side, we have government quarantine facilities where at some places we have booked some places we have booked even 5-star hotels, some places the hostels of the government, temples, and many NGOs have come forward to offer their spaces uh, as free quarantine facilities to the patients affected with corona. So here the challenge is, say if there is one block in a district which has not seen much of an outbreak, and say if I get one positive patient and there are 7 people who have come in contact with that person, so if I have to institutional quarantine these 7 people, the infrastructure that is required for 7 people or 70 people is same, because I need to put a security guard, I need to put a nurse over there, I have to think about the safety of these people in the night also, I have to ensure that these people don't go out, and this should be slightly away from the village or the town. So when there are both male and female, so these are issues to matlab, how to separate them, these are issues. But nevertheless, I have seen that we are a resilient nation. People have cooperated a lot. In fact, I was amazed in all the 3 phases of the lockdown, the way shopkeepers and traders and associations have given support in terms of, say, closing all the shops and keeping economic activity on a moratorium for the public good. And I have seen people, we are getting phone calls to our control rooms and on our Twitter handles and on our WhatsApp and to our health surveillance team about anybody coming from, say, Ahmedabad or Rajkot or Kutch or from Morbi. So in fact, I would say that the villagers are more, in fact, having more awareness than the urban people, probably due to urban apathy. But nevertheless, we are getting a lot of calls due to which surveillance is really happening. Out of the 4 cases that I had in my district, all 4 we could trace due to surveillance only. It was not off the cuff case, but rather it was from our surveillance activity. So while quarantine is posing many challenges to us, people by and large have been very cooperative. But at the same time, I must say, when you give the news to a patient that you are now corona positive, there can be a 50% drop in his confidence. And most of the times, that urge for being with a loved one, that urge to be pampered by a loved one, and the confidence that that you repose in some member of your family because of natural human instincts, because of these biological and emotive issues, there tend to be certain deviations. But nevertheless, I think quarantine by and large has been a success in this country, because if at all the quarantine would have failed, our cases would have surged to a large extent by now. So while there are challenges, I definitely understand that we have placed counselors at every place, and it is these counselors who are doing a great job in convincing people to uh, remain self quarantined. And I found some cases where the streets were narrow, the houses were so small, then people started to go to their fields and stay there for 7 8 days. So people have been finding ways and means to adjust themselves whenever such a situation demands.
Sure. There is another question that how do we respect the concerns of those who ordinarily rely on public transport and now feel unable to travel? Also, what are the facility to frontline barriers who are on runaway from basic things, uh, basic essentials, and what are the like the barriers, frontline barriers are facing problems like mask and gloves and PPE kits, and how are we like how we will transport the migrants? This is the question.
Yeah, yes. So I will come to it step by step. When lockdown was announced on March 24th, like the government of Gujarat has done something very beautiful, that in every district we have a dedicated COVID hospital, because we were very clear that COVID patients should be treated at only one hospital so that we don't infect our health staff, and the probability of the health staff getting infected will automatically go down. So we created dedicated health COVID health facilities at the district level upon the advice of the Honorable CM, and we informed the local Indian Medical Association chapters that if they find any symptoms of flu or severe acute respiratory infection, to refer them to our flu OPD, which is in the government hospital. And we made a ward for them, a separate ward, which will have separate entry and exit from the existing hospital, so as to not transmit the virus to other wards of the hospital. So by doing this, we got a lot of relief. And at that time, the cost of a PPE kit was nearly 1000 to 1200 rupees, and it was in heavy shortage. Similarly, if I talk about an N95 mask, people were selling it between 150 to 200 rupees. A triple layer mask was costing somewhere 30 to 40 rupees. But thanks to, that is where I see the resilience of the Indian economy. Like I have pointed in my lecture earlier, that these pandemic induced recessions will shut down one sector totally, but will create opportunities in another sector fully. So there are many manufacturers who started producing PPE kits, N95 masks, ventilators. In fact, Rajkot area has seen creation of new ventilators, and the cost of the ventilator got decreased by 90%. So today I am able to get a PPE kit in only 600 rupees. N95 masks roughly between 40 to 45 rupees. So it is reduction of 66% of rate, and I am able to get it immediately. And the government of Gujarat has also procured numbers in large quantities, because we decided to provide these N95 masks, triple layer masks right up to our surveillance teams. And then when we realized that because there can be a spike in cases in June and July, we have created another two layer structures. At the block level, we created something called as a COVID care center, which has 20-bed hospital, either in a community health center or in a private health facility, where mild and asymptomatic cases can be treated. There also we are following all the protocols. At the sub-district level, in sub-district hospitals, we have created dedicated COVID health facilities where there are 50-bed hospitals. And at the district level, we have 100-bed hospitals. And in districts where cases are high, we in fact went for MOUs with private hospitals. and requisited the entire hospital for COVID treatment. And we started paying even unoccupancy charge for each bed to the hospital. So that is how, by having a large heart, we approached the treatment to the COVID patient, and the treatment is fully free of cost. And we audit each and every case, we audit each and every fatality through through a WhatsApp group and feedback mechanisms. So today the frontline workers are not in shortage of any kind of material. At least in the state of Gujarat, I can definitely vouch for it. And number two, he asked about migrant laborers. Very candidly, I want to say that I am not much of an industrialized district, but I have worked earlier at Surat, and even at my place also nearly 50,000 to 1 lakh people. Uh, Laborers are there from different parts of the country, and we take pride in saying that every week we used to give them a ration kit of 3 kilo rice, 3 kilo wheat, 1 liter oil, 2 kilo dal, 1 kg of salt and 1 kg of sugar, 200 grams of say turmeric powder and 500 grams of mirchi powder. This was the composition of the kit for a week. This was given from the state government disaster relief fund to every migrant worker located in every part. Similarly, the NGOs, see, Gujarat is a place for philanthropy. The NGOs with an open heart have done similar kind of exercises. They have not only run ration, they have not only supplied the ration kit, but they have also run kitchens and shelter homes. Similarly, factory owners have also displayed large heart. And in Gujarat, we have some scheme called as a Annam Brahmam scheme, where destitutes and homeless and people who don't have a ration card, okay, including migrant workers at places, were given not allowed anyone to go hungry in these 47 to 48 days of lockdown. At the same time, I have been receiving calls from the Honorable Member of Parliaments and many political leaders and many bureaucrats from different states, where they have been WhatsApping us the details of the migrant laborers stranded in our district. And we cater to them and we send images of them that, sir, they have received what you have demanded from us. So this has created a lot of contribution satisfaction equilibrium. And with regard to transportation of the migrant labor, the government of India was very kind enough to have sanctioned trains. We have sent many trains to UP and Orissa. I will be sending 2 more trains to MP. One train earlier had a sanctioned strength of 1,200, but now government of India has increased it to 1,600. And say if I have to send laborers to Jharkhand, he have only 600 laborers. So I and Jamnagar collector, we both are coordinating. So he has 1,000 laborers, I have 600 laborers. So there will be a stop at Jamnagar and then at Surendranagar, and then the train will be proceeding to Jamnagar. So this type of cooperation at the block level, we are sending messages to the factory owners and we are messaging to the local representatives. So they are coming to our office, they are registering themselves. Before going, we are giving health screening certificate to each and every passenger, and food, not just one time, but that will survive for the entire journey. Say Orissa, it is say 30 hours. So the food will be packed as per the 30-hour schedule. If at all the train is going in 14 hours, it will be packed as per that schedule. So we understand that the shoulders of laborers contribute a lot to the development of our state. Their sweat and the aroma and the fragrance of their sweat means a lot to the GDP of my state. And we have a moral responsibility treating them as our brothers and sisters. And in that spirit, government of Gujarat has approached the migrant laborers with lot of compassion and passion.
Great. Good to know that your district is taking so much initiative and your state is taking so many initiatives. there is a question that after the restrictions will be over from Ahmedabad district, many people will move towards Surendra Nagar's villages. What is your strategy to deal with such a situation towards villages and small talukas of Surendra Nagar?
See, already lot of movement has been happening. One thing we need to realize is that it has been 47 days of lockdown. A human being has psychological, physiological, social security needs, and there is an urge to meet family members, the children, old age people. Some people need to travel to Ahmedabad for repeated medical issues. So while say keeping in view this issue, government of Gujarat has been liberal because as I said to you in the beginning, pandemics induce anti-immigration feelings, and these anti-immigration feelings need not be across countries, but it can be at times across states and across districts and across within a same street at times. So we are seeing some kind of a reductional analysis of those feelings. So while citizens are coming to us with lot of concern, we have been ensuring 100% surveillance of anybody coming to the district of Surendranagar in the last 15 days. We are nearly surveying every day 4,500 people at large. People who are coming from Surat and Ahmedabad and Rajkot and Kutch and Morbi. And people have been jokingly saying that once upon a time it was tough to get visa for USA, and today it has become tough to enter Surendranagar. And colloquially they say that there is, people have left Surendranagar saying there is nothing in Surendranagar, and today they are coming back saying there is nothing in Surendranagar. Although the definition of there is nothing is changing, but I think that kind of on a lighter side, that kind of feeling is also there. So we are ensuring that this kind of migration will need lot of surveillance. We have been instructed by the highest authorities that surveillance is our topmost priority. We have today nearly 1,000 teams doing surveillance. And we are planning in the next 10 days, 10 to 15 days, we want to cover the entire population of Surendranagar, not just town, but the district, 17 lakh population, with a dose of arsenic 30, which is a homeopathy immunity booster. At the same time, with a local Ayurveda decoction called the Ukala. So we want to give a dose to everybody in the entire 17 lakh population. And for that, now we are buying oximeters, because thermal screening, we don't know how effective it is, because say when the battery of the machine is low, or when the distance between the forehead and the machine is not proper, it is often giving to conflicting results, and it may sometimes lead to false positive results. So we are purchasing 1,000 for 1,000 teams, 1,000 oximeters. So we'll go to every home and ask every family member to put his finger in the oximeter, so that we understand his heartbeat and the consumption of oxygen, which is one of the primary indication of having, say, corona, because in corona, most of the fatality is due to lungs. So we want to screen for say we have completed one round, but second round we want to do this for every citizen, and at that time parallelly we want to give a dose of homeo and Ayurveda. And it is with these kind of measures, which are a mix on the curative side and on the preventive side and on the detection side. While I realize that prevention is better than disease, I also realize that the new age adage would be detection is better than prevention. So going towards that, we are mixing these options, and we are formulating our strategy.
Sure. There is a question regarding what are the possible strategies for revival of the agriculture supply chain?
Yeah. So I think one need to be very cautious and also appreciate the fact that probably we need a doctor for 10 to 15 times in our life. Maybe we need a mansion for 1 or 2 times in a life, because we may build 1 or 2 houses. We may need a carpenter at some point of life, but we need a farmer all the 3 times in a day. So the contribution of farmer to each and every one of our life is indispensable. While realizing that Government of India has not blocked any movement of essential commodity, including agriculture produce, at any place in the entire country. But we very well realize that labor is a problem because this is the harvest time. But we made a conscious decision that for agriculture and industry, both for agriculture labor and industrial labor, if you want to bring labor from any part of the country or within any district of Gujarat, the district collectors have been given a liberal hand for facilitating the movement, and also uh, with a rider that they cannot be from the containment zone. So I think this should help a lot of farmers. At the same time, we have given the liberty to the traders to go to the fields and procure the crop from the farmer. So earlier he used to bring the wheat to the APMC Mandi. So now, to prevent the spread of transmission of the virus and to maintain social distancing, we have given options to the traders to buy directly from the farmer, and this will also avoid the scope of middleman in between. But where middleman is also operating due to other structural problems of the need of capital and liquidity for the farmer, even there also we have made mechanisms for the contact of the trader and the middleman also. So this is one aspect, and at the same time, the Cotton Corporation of India has also started procuring cotton from various farmers of the district. And on the other side, the MSP operations of the government with regard to dal have also started. So my major crops in the district are by and large covered. So I think the supply chains, I think now the structural issues are not there. I think the labor is the main issue, because we are seeing a lot of flight, a lot of movement in the labor because of the lockdown. Everybody want to visit one time to their home and come back. I think this delay is having some problem, but we have a bumper crop this year by all estimates. So I think slowly the supply chain would be eased out.
I think we have reached the last question here, that how do you suggest to tackle between the trade-off between lives and livelihood? जान और जहान के बीच में, how do you balance?
See, this is a very important question. Like lives and livelihoods, we cannot separate them. They are integrated and organic. So any differentiation between lives and livelihoods is archaic and antique and arbitrary. But I want to remind everyone that Spanish flu killed more people than COVID. But see, today, the fatality rate of India is 10 per 10 million. The fatality rate of America is 2200 per 10 million. The fatality rate of Italy is nearly 5500 per 10 million. But Italy, we understand, it is the second most aging population of the world, with lot of intergenerational mingling and with the habits of heavy smoking and drinking. So there are other causes and reasons of fatality. But in India and by and large East Asia and Africa, the fatality is say 10 per 10 million. Even Pakistan has only 9 or 8 per 10 million. So we need to remember that the world will be resilient, the world will bounce back. And the point that we have to note is that it is very hard to get back. But when we know that such a space exists, that there is a space where you can get back, and that realization that there is such a space will definitely help us bounce back to enter into that space. The point is to realize there is that space. Man has entered Mars because he knew there was Mars. Man has landed on moon because he knew there was moon, and that is when that experiment has shot off. Similarly, today we have to realize that there is post-COVID world. There have been pandemics that have destroyed the face of the earth. There have been diseases with which we are living. Okay, so people have been living with HIV. People say affected with HIV are producing HIV negative babies due to the antiretroviral therapy drugs. We are able to deal with DP. So we will definitely deal with, say, the COVID, and I think it is a matter of time before we get that herd immunity. But the point is, today we have a crisis of legitimacy, we have a crisis of confidence, and it is only human being alone who can find ways to come out of this crisis, and the steps taken by government will create that legitimacy to conquer that space. And in this area, the relation between man and the state, market and the state will alter, and state will again get a new meaning. In the first and second decades of globalization, we saw state more as a facilitator and an enabler, and okay, this is a facilitator and an enabler. But today we will understand that state will also play a serving role, and it will not just steer, but it will serve the boat. And it is in that realization of that space, which may appear intangible, which may appear invisible, and but it is that conquering of the space that we need to look for, and we need not be say clouded by the mysteries of the epidemiological projections, because every, say, Bertrand Russell, the father of statistics, said to say a lie, the best way is to represent it in the form of statistic. So while seriological studies and epidemiological studies are very important, the projections need not be true, which have already been proved by the low fatality rate that we see in East Asia, Africa, and South Asia. So I think there is hope, and it is with this hope that there will be a better tomorrow, and we need to conquer that space.
Great. I think Rajesh, we had an amazing discourse today, from the historical to economical to social to medical to various aspects of this situation. Thanks for joining here. I thank all the audience for being here, and I request the audience that such a amazing discussion, if you have liked it, please like and share it on the Facebook and YouTube. And also, Rajesh, as we end here, your views on the ILETS initiative of bridging the gap between the administrators and our citizens to create awareness about the COVID-19 situation.
See, I would say that I think the COVID pandemic and the post-COVID world will provide for mushrooming of lot of online platforms, and there would be many digi entrepreneurs. So I think the initiative that has been taken by ILETS is very commendable. I sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, in gratitude and humbleness, I totally appreciate. And I think that this will say this is just a beginning. This is a beginning of the end of something that was there. And definitely a new beginning has come, where this online and virtual learning, these fluidic structures, the virtual reality and the amoebic structures and spaces that we create probably will help the lamp of knowledge to be a beacon and lantern for many foots spread across various parts of the globe. And in that direction, your initiative is really commendable.
Dhanyawad Rajesh ji. Thank you all the audience. And with this, we close the discussion. Thank you and namaskar. Thank you.